let's dive into one of the most dramatic stories in American history, how the United States went from a handful of states on the East Coast to the coast-to-coast nation we see today. It's a really complex story, so let's get right into it.
So, how did this actually happen? I mean, it wasn't an accident. This massive growth was driven by a powerful idea, some major land deals, incredibly tough journeys, new technology, and, yeah, a whole lot of conflict. To really understand this period of growth, we have to start with the big idea that was fueling the whole thing, a concept known as manifest destiny. So, what was manifest destiny? Well, it was this widespread belief that the United States had a special, almost God-given mission to expand all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. People saw it as not only inevitable, but also completely right. It became a powerful justification for the country's expansion, even when that meant moving into lands where other people already lived. Okay, so with this big idea firing everyone up, Americans started moving west. And this happened in two main ways: through huge government land purchases and through the unbelievably difficult journeys of ordinary families. The first big move was basically a shopping trip, a really big one. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson bought a gigantic chunk of land from France. We're not talking about a small plot here. This was an enormous territory that would completely change the map of the United States forever. The scale of this deal is just incredible. With a single purchase, the United States doubled in size. Just like that, overnight. This opened up millions of acres of new land and sent a very clear signal that the U.S. had huge ambitions. And that Louisiana Purchase? It was just the beginning. The promise of free, fertile land out west acted like a magnet, pulling thousands of families on journeys that are almost impossible for us to imagine today, like the famous Oregon Trail. Now, this was no simple road trip. The journey was unbelievably difficult. We're talking about months inside a covered wagon, facing blizzards, scorching heat, and the constant threat of running out of food and water. In fact, most of these settlers actually walked the entire 2,000 miles. When you look at this timeline, you can see just how fast this all went down. After the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, it was just a steady drumbeat of expansion. The U.S. brought Texas into the country in 1845, then gained a huge new territory from Mexico in 1848, and finally finalized its southern border in 1853. In just 50 years, the shape of the country was completely transformed. But this expansion wasn't always peaceful. In fact, a lot of this new land was acquired through war, and the pace of people moving west was about to get supercharged by an incredible discovery. A really crucial turning point came when the United States officially made Texas a state. See, Mexico still considered Texas part of its territory, and this disagreement over the border quickly blew up into a full-blown war that would have massive consequences. It's really important to know that this was not a popular war for everyone back home. A lot of Americans, including a young congressman you might have heard of named Abraham Lincoln, were deeply against it. They saw it as an unjust war that was just being fought to take land from a weaker neighbor. In the end, the United States won the war. And as part of the peace treaty, Mexico was forced to give up an enormous amount of land, what is now pretty much the entire American Southwest. This was the final major piece needed to fulfill that dream of a nation stretching from sea to shining sea. And then, what happens next? The timing is just unbelievable. Right as this huge new territory was added, someone discovers gold in California. This kicked off the famous gold rush of 1849, and suddenly hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world were rushing to the West Coast, hoping to strike it rich. Okay, so having a gigantic country is one thing, but how do you actually connect it all? How do you tie it together? Well, this is where some brand new technology and some key new laws came in to stitch the nation together. The Transcontinental Railroad was a complete game changer. Seriously. A journey that used to take months by wagon could now be done in about a week. It made it way easier for people to move west, but it also allowed farmers to ship their goods back east, which fueled the economy. Plus, they built telegraph lines right alongside the tracks, so for the first time, a message could travel across the country instantly. The government also got directly involved in getting people to move. The Homestead Act of 1862 was basically an incredible deal. If you moved out to the Great Plains, built a home, and farmed the land for 5 years, the government would give you 160 acres, absolutely free. This law was a huge reason why the vast middle of the country got settled. But this story of progress and growth has a much, much darker side. For the people who already called these lands home, this expansion wasn't progress at all. It came at a terrible price. Let's be really clear about this. For the dozens of Native American tribes living across the West, this wave of settlers wasn't progress. It was an invasion that led to the near total destruction of their way of life. The consequences were devastating. Tribes were forced off the lands their ancestors had lived on for generations and pushed onto small, often barren reservations. The buffalo, which were essential for their food, clothing, and shelter, were hunted almost to extinction. It was a period of immense loss, of land, of life, and of culture. And at the very same time, another huge conflict was brewing back east. With every single new state that was added to the country, one toxic question had to be answered. Would it be a free state or a slave state? This argument over expanding slavery into the new Western territories grew so intense that it pushed the nation straight down the path to the Civil War. So when you look back, you really see two very different stories playing out at the same time. On one side, the U.S. becomes this massive continental power, rich with natural resources and a new frontier identity. But on the other side, all of that was achieved through a controversial war, the devastation of Native American societies, and by fanning the flames of the conflict over slavery. And that leaves us with a final and really difficult question. There's no doubt this period of expansion created the physical shape of the United States we see today. But knowing the full story, we have to ask ourselves, was the price of that progress just too high?